I'm Ashley,
And I'm Jasmine.
and you're tuned into Ham Radio Stranger Things podcast.
It's a ham radio.
The Cadillac of ham radios.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to yet another episode of Ham Radio as Stranger Things podcast. We've got a great episode for you today, as usual. But first, we have a little housekeeping to take care of, and I'm going to turn it over to Jasmine to let you know where you can find us on social media and where you can listen to the podcast.
Thanks, Ashley. You can find us on Instagram at Ham Radio Media, all one word, on Twitter at HamThrow, on YouTube at Ham Radio Media, or using our handle HamRadio1983. We also have a Discord you can join, which is linked in the description of this episode. If you have a fan theory or question you want to share, you can email us at hamradiomedia@gmail.com. Ashley also has a fanfic on AO3 entitled Stranger Things College, which is also linked in the description. The podcast is available on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and much more. If you like the show, please consider leaving us a rating or review. We have a lot of totally tubular stuff coming up, so be sure to follow us on social media to keep up with the podcast and all of our new content.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to yet another episode of the Ham Radio and Stranger Things podcast. I'm Ashley, and she is Jasmine.
No, we switched names this time, just to keep you
Yeah,
guys
we
guessing.
did. Exactly. You got to keep it fresh, or else
Yeah.
they'll leave. So as you guys could probably tell, I'm recovering from an illness, but it was just a sinus infection, nothing to worry about. So I'll sound a little stuffy, but other than that, I'm good. We actually delayed this recording for like a couple weeks because like Jasmine had stuff going on and then I got sick. And trust me, like a week ago, like today, I sounded like terrible. But at least, came through it. We're going to get through this episode together. We got a lot of fun stuff for you guys today. Breaking down another part of the episode 7 script. Before we get into that, we have a little homework to do. So first, Jasmine is going to get us into that, and then we're going to read a listener email that we received, and then we'll get going with the script breakdown and everything else we wanted to talk about today. So, Jasmine, if you would do the honors.
Of course. Okay, so those of you that follow us on social might have already seen this, but the Ham Radio podcast is looking for a research assistant to join our team. We are looking for somebody with a passion for writing who would be able to write script templates and conduct background research on historical and pop culture related topics on a monthly basis. The position would be volunteer to start, but could become a paid position at a later date. As you guys know, we have a lot of, we have merchandise and other things in the works to bring in income for the podcast. So that's going to be happening in the next few months. So if this sounds like something you'd be interested in, please email us at hamradiomedia@gmail.com with the subject line research assistant. Okay, and now we're going to get into a listener email that we received. So some of you know, we do take listener emails and questions. So if you have any of those, always feel free to email us. We do read them on the podcast. So it's a chance to be featured. So this email comes from Marcy. So she says, "Hello all, Marcy here. I've been listening to the podcast for a few months and I love it. I also watched the live show you did with some of my favorite podcasts. I had clinical the day you went live, so I couldn't participate in the live stream. I hope you have another one soon. I have some Stranger Things questions for you if you don't mind. So do you think Vecna will return in season 5? Why do you think they don't give Mike and Jonathan more meaningful storylines? And what do you make of Millie's recent comment about wanting the show to be over? I'd also like to give a big shout out to my big brother, Brandon, who's a part of Ham Radio. Thanks again, Marcy." So Ashley, do you want to start with your thoughts on those questions?
Yeah, sure. First, I would like to thank Marcy for writing in. Like she said, Brendan, who used to be our producer, he more or less just does like the video edits in tandem with myself these days. That is his sister, his younger sister. So thank you, Marcy, for sending that in. But first, yeah, I'll tackle Marcy's questions. So for the first one, yeah, I absolutely think Vecna will return next season. I mean, I think it's almost been confirmed at this point. I mean, Will at the end of season 4 says like he's still alive, and we know that you know when Nancy and Steve and Robin went to go check on things outside the crew house and upside down, he wasn't there. But I think the biggest question will be like, and what how will we see Vecna next season? I mean, obviously he was super injured by Nancy and company, and I think too, because the crew house, is such a source of power for him and the vines and stuff. What what is he like without that power source and that sanctuary, if you will? Um, but yeah, I absolutely think he will be back in season 5. I think it would be a big mistake if they didn't bring him back, because he's such a good villain for the show. I mean, I've never wanted to see a villain on screen more than him. So yeah, I think he will return in season 5. About Mike and Jonathan, you know, I'm really surprised, more so by Mike, what they've done with him the last couple seasons. Um, especially season 1, like he was such a you know vocal presence and leader of the group, and it's like the writers just took him and made him a boy, made him become a boyfriend, and which is fine. Uh, but it's like that's all he is now, and it seems like he just exists to serve as a crutch to 11, which I think she needs that. But I don't know. I don't. I mean, I honestly have no idea why they have done what they've done with those two characters. I mean, Jonathan's is probably less surprising to me, but I mean, they really did him really dirty in season 4. I don't know if it was, you know, uh, a time issue with the actor, or because they had so much else going on in season 4, they just, didn't know what else to do with him. I mean, obviously, there's stuff involving Jonathan that is not resolved, and they've said that, and that they said it will be resolved next season. But I hope for both of them that they get more meaningful storylines next season. Um, Nothing would satisfy me more, because like they're good characters, but I think just the writing last couple seasons has kind of disserviced them um, a little bit. Um, and then the final question. So I think Marcy is referring to Millie Bobby Brown did a interview with a magazine like before the strikes happened, and she was asked about the end of season 5 or then the show, and she basically said something like, you know, um, I can't wait for it to be over because there's projects that I want to do and all that, and I do think that what she said, I mean, that's not verbatim, but what she said were maybe, poor choice of words. But it's also, this was from a magazine. Maybe if it was a filmed interview, maybe we could hear the tone. Maybe it would be a little bit different. But I don't know. Maybe, I mean, this isn't the first time that Millie's like done this, I know of. So I don't know if it's like a PR issue with her PR team or something, but I mean, I know like she's 19 years old, and she has a lot of growing up left to do, but I mean, you are the star of the show. I mean, whether you like it or not, your character is the main character of the show, most popular character of the show. So people hold you up in a different light and a different standard than compared to the others. I mean, yeah, I thought it was a, maybe a poor choice of words there. And also, it's kind of like, well, I mean, you don't think your other coworkers, your other co-actors, haven't um, missed opportunities for filming other things because of this show. Like, you're not the only one that, um, hasn't been affected by that. And in fact, like Millie Bobby Brown I mean, she's such a talented actress that, I mean, she could look in the opposite direction and get any acting gig that she wants, right? And I mean, not that the other actors aren't good, but I'm just saying, you know, they haven't really done much outside of Stranger Things like she has. And I don't really know what the future holds for them. I hope it's bright, but the studios aren't lining up out the door to sign them. But I mean, that's how um, I see it. Jasmine?
Yeah, for sure. So to start with again, thank you, Marcy, for the questions. We always love getting listener questions. But yeah, to start with the first question, do I think Vecna will return in season 5? Absolutely. I mean, the Stranger Things writers account has already confirmed that Jamie Campbell will be back. They did a birthday post and they had a cute little addition where they said, his acting is all the more incredible when you know him in real life. He's the kindest, most generous person. We can't wait to see you back on set. And for those of you who don't know, when we see Vecna like in the full Vine get up, that's not when I first saw it. I thought, oh, maybe it's a different actor, because sometimes they have people in suits, you know what I mean, like a different actor doing that part and one actor playing, the orderly. But that actually is J.B. Campbell in both. He goes through hours of makeup and prosthetics to be in the Vecna suit. Basically, it's not a suit, but you know what I mean. So they've already confirmed he's coming. He's going to be back on set for season 5. So do I think he is? Yes, absolutely. They've said that. And like Ashley said, it'd be cool to see, are we going to get more flashbacks, when he was an orderly, his time at the lab before that happened, when he was a kid, what happened before they moved to Hawkins. We're definitely going to see him in the full Vecna get up. We have to, in order for there to be a final battle, in order for them to, you know what I mean? Like to face that evil. So yes, absolutely. I'm with Ashley on this one. And as to, why do we think they're not giving Mike and Jonathan more meaningful storylines? I agree with Ashley. For Jonathan, to me, like I didn't expect his character to go as off the rails as he did in season 4. That being said, I mean, his original role in the show from season 1 was, parts of that role were given to Joe Keery, right? And that entire storyline was reworked back in season 1. So I think, as a lot of people have said, they just didn't know what to do with Jonathan after that. You know what I mean? Like he had a specific role in season 1, and once that was completed and it turned into a series, not an anthology, it's like they didn't know what to do with Jonathan anymore, and he basically turned into like the getaway driver for Nancy. But then they were separated in season 4, and it's like there was nothing left for him to do, and like he wasn't even driving the van for most of it. Argyle was. So I just feel like they don't like they wrote a specific role for Jonathan and then they just kind of got stuck. They don't know what to do with him as a character. Because I feel like all the other characters have evolved, or at least we've seen growth or change. And from Jonathan, we really haven't. We saw like some growth kind of in season 2. And I guess you could argue towards it in season 3. But then we hit season 4 and it's like he's regressed as a character. So my take on it is that they just don't know what to do with Jonathan. Like he's fulfilled his purpose on the show, but so they don't know how to continue and evolve the character, which I think is kind of sad because for all the other characters and the actors that play them, they get to have this growth and this evolution, and Jonathan really doesn't. So I don't know, why. I mean, they've had 4 seasons. You think they could figure it out? So I don't know, why they haven't been able to do that. I hope we get a satisfying conclusion there. He's not my favorite character, but it would be nice to see some growth, find out what's actually going on with him, because they've hinted at what's wrong and what's going on, but they haven't actually straight up addressed it. What's the root cause of how we wound up in this state in season 4, and see some growth and some evolution, and Jonathan dealing with his demons. I think that would be really great to see as part of like the conclusion of his arc. because a lot of things they set up in earlier seasons that he wanted, he straight up tells Argyle at the beginning of season 4 he doesn't want those things anymore, and it's kind of hinted that maybe he never did in some cases. So it would be really great to see him address what's going on, deal with his demons, all this stuff. And as for Mike, I'm with Ashley on this one. I don't know why they chose to go the way they did with Mike in season 4, because that's very different than the kid we saw in season 1 and 2, definitely. And even season 3, like, yeah, Mike was kind of a little shih tzu at several points, but he did apologize. He did, try his best by the end of the season, make up for things. And then we get to season 4, and like Ashley said, he's kind of just turned into the boyfriend for Elle. But that would be one thing if he was being like the world's most amazing boyfriend. But from the opening of season 4, we find out that he's been a crappy boyfriend this past year, a crappy friend to Will. And he's only gotten away with it because Elle and Will aren't talking to each other about that particular issue, and they're not aware the other person is lying. And I personally think it's going to be part of Mike's storyline in season 4, because now that they're all going to be stuck in the cabin together, like the Byers Hopper family, the fact that Mike is being a little shih tzu is gonna come out at some point. Do you know what I mean? It's at some point those two characters it's gonna come up somehow. So they're gonna have to address it. And yeah, I don't know why they went that direction with Mike, because he was such a, as Ashley said, a great leader and just a really great, well-rounded character, I felt like, in the earlier seasons. And as other people have commented on, he was a kid with so much compassion and love for his friends, Will in particular, as his best closest friend. And then by the time you get to season 4, it's like, if the implication is supposed to be that he knows Will is gay and is in love with him, and he can't address it, I feel like the Mike we saw earlier would be able to address that. So I know Finn Wolfhard has said in interviews that there is some kind of a plan to kind of address what Mike's been going through, his response to trauma, and that fans are really going to enjoy, where that's going. So I hope that's right. And, we're going to get that stuff addressed, and we're going to see kind of more of a return to the Mike we got in season 1 and 2, which I feel was like the best Mike. I also really like Mike as a character, so I'm hoping we get a return to that. And I'm kind of hoping that they've done this the way they took those characters in season 4. I hope there was a specific reason, you know what I mean? Like, I hope there was something they're going towards here, and not just, we don't know what to do with these guys, so we're just doing this, because I feel like that does their characters and the actors who play them a disservice. And as for Millie's recent comments, I actually have a bit of a different take than Ashley on this one. I feel like her comments were really taken out of context when they were re-reported, as often happens. And actually, while you were talking, I looked up to see if I could find the interview, and I found it. So I'm going to read it for everybody. So she was doing an interview with Glamour, which, first of all, I mean, Glamour is not exactly it's not the New Yorker. Like, it's not, Glamour's not exactly hard-hitting news. So let's remember that, guys. Not crapping on Glamour, but just, you know what I mean? It's Glamour magazine. So first of all, let's take that into account. And second of all, so when she was asked about this, she said that she was ready to say goodbye to the show, and she compared it to the ending of the show to graduating from high school, and said, when you're ready, you're like, all right, let's go, let's do this, let's tackle this senior year, let's get out of here. And she said, Stranger Things takes up a lot of time to film, and it's preventing me from creating stories that I'm passionate about, so I'm ready to say thank you and goodbye. To me, I feel like that got taken out of context, because to me that just says, okay, she's ready to finish this off and let this go. She's ready to move on to the next thing, which is totally fair. I think people forget, but this show has been delayed by 4 years at this point. Like, first by COVID, then by the writers and actors strike. I mean, the cast was planning on being done like 4 years ago. Do you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't their fault that this stuff happened. So they've planned projects, things in their personal life, school, like she's said to get married, she's talked about wanting a family, they have other things in their lives that they've been planning that they keep having to put on hold or switch around, because the show that, gave them their big break, or, reinvigorated their careers for other cast members, keeps getting put on hold for reasons outside their control. And also, like, she started that role when she was very young. So it's been over 10 years of their lives. I can understand wanting to move on. I just feel like it got taken out of context, because, to put that in context for the rest of us, I mean, if I worked a job for 10 years and I was ready to move on, you might have mixed feelings about it as you go to the end of that contract or whatever that thing is. And I think a lot of times people hold actors to something, being like always asking them about it, wanting them to be, a certain level, or you should be grateful. I don't think she is ungrateful. Like, I mean, she wouldn't be doing the last season if she didn't want to. She certainly does not need the money or need the exposure. Nobody on that show does, at least not out of the main cast. I think she's just ready to move forward. And I mean, they've given this show like 10 years of their lives, almost. And I mean, it's been delayed by 4 years. And they spent most of that unable to work and shut up inside because of the pandemic and then the strikes. So I can see why they're itching to kind of close this chapter and move forward. And I'm sure it must be frustrating for them, as it was for many people during that time, to not be able to work or leave your home or be able to really move forward with your life, and having, have to keep changing things, putting things on hold, rejigging things all the time for like on and on for 4 years. So to me, it just comes across as, she's ready to, give this the conclusion it deserves and move forward with her life. And like, I totally respect that. So that's my take on it. Also, shout out to Brendan again. We love you. You're awesome. Also, before I forget, I don't know if I said this the last time we recorded, but we have a new audio editor, and his name is Ashton Cooper, and he does very good work for us. So I wanted to shout him out because I know I've mentioned we got a new one, but I don't know if I mentioned by name. So Ashton, I know you're going to listen to this when you edit it. This is your shout out. Thank you for being here.
Yes, I second that. Ashton has been so awesome, really good to work with, does an awesome job, and we love having him part of the Ham Radio family. Give a shout out to Robin from the Coffee and Contemplation podcast, who very generously made audiograms from our Stranger Things Day live stream event that we did. If you want to go watch those, she has them on the Coffee Contemplation Instagram page, and I believe they're on ours too, right, Jasmine?
Yes, we have been tagged in them. So if you go to our Instagram and you click on Reels or tagged section, you will be able to see them on our account as well.
Yes. And if you want to go back and rewatch the live stream event, if you weren't able to join us, it's on our YouTube channel. You can go and actually watch our faces and all that. Or if you want to listen to it, it is now available on the podcasting platforms. So you can go back and re-listen to it, like you, Marcy, since you were unable to actually join us. And again, we had such an awesome time with all our guests. And, since filming will be here soon, maybe within the next year or so, we'll have something, big like a trailer or something, or, another Stranger Things Day event next year. We can all come back together and do it again. But before we move on, I just did want to piggyback a little bit on what Jasmine was saying about Mike and Jonathan. I feel like, all that was a lot to do with, kind of the thing that they were going for with season 4 of like, I think they wanted the audience to feel like, gosh, if only everyone was together in Hawkins this season, maybe everything that happened wouldn't have happened, or, it wouldn't have got out of hand, certainly with the whole Jason thing and all that. And I think about in episode 3 of season 4, when Max is going through the files in Miss Kelly's office, and, she's reading Fred and Chrissy's files, and she sees, the symptoms they've had, and we see a flashback of her, and she's, has a nosebleed, and Mike in class, and Mike is sitting there beside her, and he sees this, and I just think, if they kept Mike in Hawkins this season for the entire season, would he have picked up on that earlier than the others and been like, "Hey, Max, I think there's a connection here," because remember that nosebleed you had in class, and yeah, I don't know if it could have saved Max's life, but maybe it could have, prolonged it, to the next season. maybe they'd had another extra hand at the Creel house, and Jason wouldn't have come in there and screwed everything up. I don't know. That's just my take on it. But I don't think we'll ever really know the full answer to that. And maybe, depending on what happens in season 5 with these characters, it may not even matter at that point. But your guess is as good as mine. So I just had this like really random question because I've been rewatching season 4 last few weeks, and when I was watching season 4, like this happens up pretty much every time I rewatch it and then go back and rewatch all the, first 3 seasons. I don't know if it's a cinematography thing or because it's, this season was so much bigger than the others and longer. But do you ever, whenever you rewatch, do a full rewatch of Stranger Things, including season 4, does season 4 ever seem like a different show to you, like a spinoff, but with the same characters? If so.
Yeah, I say in some ways it does, in other ways it doesn't. The Hawkins plot to me still feels very much like Stranger Things, like that we've had for the past 3 seasons. I will say there are times when the other plots, well, I guess Hawkins and Nevada and the memories that we see, I think that feels very much like the previous seasons. I will say there are times when the California and Russia plots feel like a spin-off or feel like a different show. And there are moments when they don't. I'd say the Russia plot feels like a bit of a spin-off up until the point where Hopper when he gets the lighter, he manages to steal the lighter and says all that stuff to Dimitri to kind of get what he needs to have a chance at defeating the Demogorgon. That's the first moment I feel like we see the Hopper we've known for 3 seasons, and that's the moment where, for me anyway, that plot I think feels more like the Stranger Things we know and love. Like that's the moment for me. Of course, once Murray and Joyce arrive in Russia, once it all comes together, the California plot probably feels the least like the show we've seen because apart from when they go and see Susie, which I could easily see as like an offshoot of any other season, post season 2, the rest of it doesn't really, we've talked about before how the stuff at the school in California, like in Lenore Hills, feels fake. It doesn't feel realistic. It doesn't feel like Stranger Things. It plays too loosey goosey with the rules. So I'd say the rest of it doesn't really feel like the show or the characters we've come to know, apart from when they go and see Susie and her family. So I'd say definitely parts of it feel that way, and parts of it feel very much like the show we've come to know and love. But what's your take on it, Ashley? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like the same as you. To me, like Russia is definitely like, if Hopper's not there, that is definitely a different show. I mean, it's there's no question about that. And yeah, the California stuff. I mean, yeah, it definitely felt so far out of left field. I mean, it felt like that episode in season 2 when Eleven goes to find her sister, except it wasn't all done in one episode, you know? And I will say, in terms of Hawkins, the whole Jason and basketball team thing, like, especially in episodes 3 and 4, when they're trying to find Eddie, if Lucas is not with them, it's a different show. Because I mean, they're completely different new characters, Now, I will say that in episode 8, when they're at the war zone, and Jason, confronts Nancy, that part actually did feel very Stranger Things to me. It felt like, dare I say it, Steve in season 1, which they said that Jason is supposed to be like what Steve was supposed to be if, he didn't turn out to be the character that he became. But yeah, I mean, there were parts where it felt like a totally different show, but others it was like Stranger Things. But like for me, whenever I watch season 3 and at the end, like you can make the argument like the series could have ended with that. I mean, yeah, you'd have a lot of questions and stuff, but for the most part, like they got the job done. They killed the monster, got the gate closed. Um, Life is changing for everyone, but I mean, you could have, if they had wanted to, they could have ended it right there. Especially like with Hopper's letter and stuff, it felt so much like a series ending type moment to me, you know. And so whenever you watch that and then you immediately go into season four, and I know it's because like it was filmed 3 years after season three, but they open it up with how they open it and stuff. And whenever I watch season four, I mean it feels like I'm kind of watching a different show. It just, I don't know, I can't really pinpoint it 100%, but um it feels like they definitely opened a new chapter in the story. Um, and it's, a different type of story, but with the same characters, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can see that.
All right. So, on the Stranger Things 5 content stuff, Ross Dofer he's been the man. Like he's been giving us the behind the scene pics. Um, Last few weeks, the Duffer Brothers were in Atlanta, checking out the set locations, making sure everything was good with that, and they've been doing camera tests and hair, makeup tests, wardrobe, all that, the prelims that you have to do. And he's been sharing, or he had been sharing, some behind the scene pics. They, as of this recording, they have since gone returned to LA. They'll be back in Atlanta after the holidays. And so, just sharing our thoughts on that. And the one thing, I kind of noticed from like some of the stuff inside the school that they've been showing and all that, it makes me question like, um, will season five be as apocalyptic as we think? Because I mean, I know episode one, I mean, I know they're gonna hit the ground running and all that, but you know, up until this point, I've been looking at it through a lens of like it's just gonna be all out, monsters and all that attacking, and we're not gonna catch a break. But I mean, it kind of seems like there are going to be more normal moments, I guess you'd say, of the season. Um, and then we got some casting calls that have been made official, and I noticed a lot of auditions for high school students and a featured male role, perhaps a love interest for Will. Jasmine, what do you make of all of it?
Yeah, like I've been really excited that we've been getting all the behind the scenes stuff. Something I also caught in an interview that came out recently with the Duffer Brothers is that so Matt Duffer recently, like him and his partner recently had a baby. So I'm like, oh, that makes sense. He's got they mentioned that he's got a 1 year old at home. And so that makes sense as to why Ross Duffer's the one doing all the behind the scenes stuff, right? Because, Matt's showing up and then like they've got a 1 year old at home, right? 1 year olds are a lot of work, right? So he's showing up to do the job, and then like he's also got his family to look after, right? So I caught that in an interview recently where I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Like Ross is basically handling like the behind the scenes stuff and kind of the extra fan content because like Matt's got a job to do and he's got a family, right? He's got a 1 year old at home. So I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I'm loving that we're getting the behind the scenes content. We're getting set locations, we're getting, graffiti, Stranger Things graffiti the locals have done. I love the signs with the Spotify, like the Apple Music, like QR codes, with the different signage. I mean, of course, the big one um, is the cast list for the first episode, who scratched out, that whole thing. They're showing how big the wardrobe is, that they've got like three rows high, massive warehouse of all the costumes, which appear to include both stuff from the 80s and so that appear to be flashbacks. So presumably from, the Creel family's time in Hawkins. So yeah, I've been loving that. As I'm sure everyone else has. Yeah, and about it being apocalyptic, I don't know, because everyone's saying that, but I mean, I think you got to balance that out with the more normal moments, because otherwise, it's just turning into like an apocalyptic, doomsday type setup, which isn't really what Stranger Things is, and they always kind of try to strike that balance between different genres and focusing on the characters. So I think it's going to be probably more of a mix of those character moments we've grown accustomed to and kind of your everyday stuff and the apocalyptic doom and gloom and the bad guys are coming and we got to defeat Vecna. So I think it's probably going to be a mix, probably more like what we saw, I'd say, kind of in seasons 1 and 2, and then kind of the first half of season 3, in terms of the mix of like, okay, defeating the evil, dealing with this, and kind of your everyday teenage kid stuff. So that's kind of my take on it. And like Ashley said, they've started doing auditions for high school students. They're also looking for vintage cars from that era, from 86 and 87, which is interesting, because it could mean that we could be seeing either they're just looking for a wider range of cars, or maybe something from 1987 is going to be included. There's also, been reporting that they're casting for a future male role. And my big money on that is a love interest for Will, because I can't really see what else that would be. Like the town is evacuating, so the high school population is going to shrink, and I can't see what else they'd use a role like that for. Because I was thinking about the other day, and I'm like, everybody else either has a love interest already or potential love interest except for Will. They've kind of opened up those storylines, or for every other character, principal character anyway. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for. That's what makes the most sense to me. And I know we were going to talk about this later, Ashley, but do you want to get into who what our theories are for who is scratched out on the cast list?
Yeah, we can do that now if you want to.
Do you want to start with who you think it is, or do you want me to go first, or?
It doesn't matter. You can if you want.
Sure. So, well, my big guess on that is that it's Linda Hamilton's character. Because I know that people speculated it could be Max, it could be Vecna, but because we already know Vecna's going to be in the season, it's pretty much presumed Max is going to be in some capacity, even if she's just lying in a hospital bed, like she's, Tasting's going to be in some capacity. So, to me, I know people have said that, but to me, I'm kind of like, well, why would they scratch it out? Every other character on that list is someone we already know is going to be there. To me, I'm thinking Linda Hamilton because we know she's been cast, but we don't know what her role is. And scratching it out would make sense to me because it's like, well, we don't know when she's going to be introduced. So that kind of keeps the mystery alive. Or I know some people have said, well, maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's somebody that like we already know is there, and they're just doing this to like mess with us and like, create speculation, which I could totally see them doing. And actually, I just had a thought yesterday that I wanted to share with you, where I know, we've talked about who Linda Hamilton could be playing, and people have gone towards, well, maybe a government person, maybe somebody who is part of, Sullivan's group that breaks off, maybe, involved with the lab or Brenner, but which I don't think are good ideas. But I had a thought yesterday, since Murray appears on that list, like the cast list for episode 1, if the other person is Linda Hamilton, it made me think, what if she's not any of those things? What if she's like an investigative reporter or somebody who's part of that world who winds up in Hawkins like to report on what's going on, or or knows Murray from back in the day or something like that, because we know Murray's back in town. So I kind of thought of it like, well, I could kind of see it being like, oh, maybe she's there to kind of get the scoop, realizes something is up, recognizes Murray because he used to be a respected reporter, right? And maybe that's how she kind of becomes involved. or something like that, because if that is the character that's scratched out, I can see that's a much easier entry point into this world for her character. Whereas it would, to me, it seems odd that if she's a government person or a lab person or somebody involved with Brenner, for her to be on the same list as like Murray and Karen and the rest of the main cast right off the bat from episode one, but other characters that aren't part of that main cast, you know what I mean? That are involved with that aren't on that list. I mean, they could be farther down the list, you know what I mean? Like there could be a break, but then those would be listed, I think, farther down because of secondary characters or because of dialogue. So that was a thought I had the other day that I wanted to share. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that would be like totally awesome if that were the case. And I mean, to be honest with you, it wouldn't make a lot of sense because I would feel like, what we saw at the end of season four, that's going to make national headlines, in my opinion. Like, I'm talking like ABC, NBC, the big boys of the newspaper world, that sort of thing. And I would love that. You know, perhaps she's also, was around during the time of the Creel murders and stuff and can give us more insight into that. But yeah, I mean, I would love that. I think whoever Linda Hamilton is playing, I think is obviously an important character because, like, I remember when they were releasing the new characters for season four. I mean, they all gave them names, even who we now know as Henry Creel. He was Peter Ballard, and that was just, I mean, that was, just a fake name. And the fact that, you know, we don't know the name of her character, and if her character is the one that's marked off with the and is with the main cast list in episode one, like to me, I mean, whoever she's playing is obviously important to not only this season but the end of the series. And I know Linda Hamilton is iconic, and for them to, get her for this season, I mean, the fifth and final season was awesome, but it feels like they reached out to her, because I remember Robert England, like he reached out to them and they made the older Victor Creel character for him, and they gave us his name for that, and he was only in one episode for like 20 minutes,
Yeah. And
um
I guess on that point, I wonder if there's something like, I wonder if we've, because you know how they talked about Penthurst back in season one and then it came back? I wonder if the name of her character, like the reason they're not telling us the name or even a fake name, is because something about the name of her character or even a fake description would give away too much. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I wonder if they
yeah,
think we're going to be able, eagle-eyed fans are going to be able to connect it. That's what I'm wondering, because otherwise, you're right. Like, why not do the fake description or the fake name like we got for Jamie Campbell Bower?
yeah. And I mean, I'm sure we could rewatch and stuff and go back and see like anything that they've talked about. And if that's the case, to me, it's obviously got to be something connected with Brenner and the lab. Um, if that is the case, or the Krill family themselves, um, which I think would be uh, even better, because either way, well, we know that we're going to get backstory of uh, Henry and all that, and his time at the lab and his mother, and they have to tell that some way. I mean, what better way than have Linda Hamilton character tell it? But I mean, I'm excited regardless of who she's playing. I mean, yeah, I want to know obviously, but Linda Hamilton is iconic, and I think it's um, you know great that they were able to get her for the fifth and final season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love kind of how the process of who they're getting has evolved, because I feel like when you're talking about 80s icons. I feel like in some cases they reached out, in other cases other people reached out to them, and I feel like that must have influenced the casting for season 5, because I remember them talking about Robert England and being like, they would never in a million years have reached out to him. He's such an icon, like, be on our little show, basically, even though it's not little, but that's how they, perceive it.
Yeah.
To him, he's so much an icon they would never consider. And I feel like that must have impacted. They must have gone, okay, at this point, if they're reaching out to us, clearly what we're doing is making an impact. Clearly it's reaching people, it's resonating. So I feel like that must have influenced season 5 going in to be like, hey, who would be the dream team? Who would we want? And then feeling confident enough to reach out to those people's like manager or whoever and be like, their agent, and be like, hey, we'd love to have them for this role. Would they consider it? And of course, I think anybody who they reach out to would obviously say yes, unless they had some major scheduling conflict, or even then, like, find a way to work around it, because the show is just so huge, that you'd be foolish to turn it down. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing but upsides to saying yes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's great, them, you know, pulling these iconic 80s stars who haven't really done a whole lot in many years, like Linda Hamilton. Like, she doesn't even live in LA anymore. She lives in New Orleans these days, and seems pretty happy. Um, so I think it's great that they are able to do that, but they're also respectful of these people and who they are, and their place in 80s pop culture. It's kind of the same with them picking songs. Like, they don't just pick songs from the 80s just because they're cool and sound good. They want it to have meaning and have purpose. So I really like their process with that. So, you ready to get into the script?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, in this little patch of script, we're going a lot into mostly the Lite-Brite scene. And the good news is, like, Jasmine, we're like almost halfway done with this script breakdown. Like, well, until we get to the
Woohoo!
monologue. The monologue, that might be, folks, seriously, additional parts just for that one scene, because it is long. Trust me. But yeah. So in this part of the script, we begin with Dustin gets the Lite-Brite idea and steals it from from Holly, who was making a little cute little bunny rabbit with it, and all that. And I just had to say that the Lite-Brite scene for me was so cool, just the way it was done, and both seeing it from the upside down POV and the right side up POV. And it's so cool to see how they wrote it in the script. You know, what did you think about it?
Yeah, I love that scene. Like that. So the showing the right side up and the upside down. That plus the bike scene at the end. Like, those are some of my. The bike scene is probably the most iconic, but those two things are probably some of I think the best kind of effects and transitions. That are some of my favorite out of the whole season.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I loved it, and it was also I thought it was cool because like, while rewatching it, I was thinking about the fact that I know Netflix did a big thing where all the cast were interviewed after the season 4 dropped, part 2 dropped, and they had them watch clips and they were like, oh my god, that's so cool. They were clearly like really amazed, and somebody on the cast said, yeah, that's the first time we've seen it with the effects and everything, because they'd filmed it like a year prior, and they're busy doing press, they got other things going on, so like they don't actually see it until much later. They could, but they're busy. And something I learned kind of from watching interviews is that, like, normally, they wouldn't watch themselves on screen, but because they hadn't seen it with the effects, right,
Mm-hmm.
like they saw it with the practical effects but not the added layer, that they were able to go back and watch it later, because just to see how the effects looked, right, because some stuff, like, it looks cool when you see it, but there's going to be an added layer to it once everything's added in, which they haven't seen. And while rewatching this scene, I realized, I'm like, oh, when they did this, they would have been just drawing in the air, like, or
Yeah.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean, like the part of the Lite-Brite lighting up, they would have had to have like mimed that, it wouldn't have been, they wouldn't have been able to see it. You know, like there would have been stuff in front of them, but until the special effects were added, you know, like they would have had to see the final version to see how cool it looked.
Yeah.
And so I love that that was cool for us, but also would have been really cool for the actors. And I really love that whole sequence. I thought it was so well done. And I love that they got more into how the lights started. They started to get into how the kind of the lights work from the right side up to the upside down, because that was always kind of hinted at how that worked in the previous seasons, but this we're actually starting to get into like how it actually works. And I had like, I don't know about you, but I had like a lot of notes for this sequence. So yeah, so we're gonna do it. So something I noticed on rewatch is that in order for the Lite-Brite to work, like for all that to work, Dustin and the rest of the gang must have somehow communicated to those in the upside down that they were going to Nancy's room, they were gonna try something. Like, and it occurred to me, I'm like, were they shouting at the ceiling? Or were they communicating through Morse code? Except that, like, you know what I mean? They wouldn't have been able to reach the lamp downstairs, and nobody else on that part of the team knew Morse code apart from SOS. So does that imply they were like, someone caused a distraction while they shouted at the ceiling? Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah. Like they are. And it's like the cops are like literally
Clueless.
there. You know, like none of them heard Dustin shouting,
Yeah,
you know,
apparently not.
and like
Um,
Holly never went and told her mom that they came and took her Lite-Brite. Like every child goes, Mom, they took my Lite-Brite, you know,
yeah.
like it never,
No, Holly's an OG though. She knows what's up. That's my
yeah,
theory here. Holly knows what's up. She's just keeping quiet because she's learned that her parents aren't going to do anything about stuff anyway. So she's
yeah,
just
yeah.
keeping. She just took her Skittles and went back to her room. Okay, Holly knows what's up. That's my theory. Because you're
I
right. You're
know.
right.
She's the best.
She's the best.
Yeah.
Um, Something else I noticed is that in the script, the actors in these scenes are referred to as kids, despite the fact that by this point, both in the show and off screen, they're actually teenagers, and some of
Yeah.
them are like young adults. But I can't appreciate that, like, if you've been writing it that way for like 3 seasons at this point, that you would kind of stick with that vernacular. And like it reminded me of how when I was in undergrad, I would refer to the other students as kids, or
Uh-huh.
like kids is a general term, until I was on a train talking to somebody one time and I was like, I don't know why I'm saying kids, we're all like in our 20s. But like, how you kind of do that when you're younger. So that's kind of what it reminded me of.
Yeah.
um and there's some descriptions, I don't know about you, but some of the descriptions in this scene and the next scene I really loved. So I really like the description when they're in Nancy's room. The shimmer dissipates on the bed, though a few particles still linger, almost like a burn in on a TV or something. I thought that was really cool. Like the way they describe things in the script, like I just
Yeah.
thought some of the descriptions were really cool. And I noticed, the thing I noticed was the most different in the whole Lite-Brite sequence, is something I think we've seen throughout the rest of the script to screen, is that a lot of Eddie's lines were changed, or the tone of the dialogue was changed, which I think was a really positive change.
Hmm.
And I think, like, kudos to Joseph Quinn on that, because to me, you can tell that they probably ran through it as scripted and wasn't working on screen, or he had some ideas. And Eddie's dialogue is a lot more natural, more colloquial. There's a banter, there's a lightness, there's a realism and like an authenticity to the way
Yeah.
Eddie
Yeah.
speaks, interacts with the rest of the group. And that's obviously Joseph Quinn. So I think he deserves his flowers for that, because Eddie is so much more of a better, relatable character that you root for because of his performance. That wasn't in, like, the script is a really good starting point, but that wasn't in the original. Like, for example, they have him say hot damn in the script. And I'm sorry if Eddie had said that, like, that's not You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
that just wouldn't
yeah,
that wouldn't work. And I can appreciate if you're an adult writing for a teenager, there's going to be times when that happens.
yeah,
But
yeah,
something I really respect about this show is that it's definitely a show that they script something, they have the actors do it, but if it's not working or somebody else has a better suggestion, they
uh-huh,
roll with it. And there's, like I've said this before, but so many shows don't do that. You can tell they're like, well, we decided this, therefore. And I love that they trust and respect their actors enough to be like, if this ain't working, that's fine. Like, let's just try
yeah,
something else.
yeah, me too.
Um, and I thought that his line that he has in the final product where he goes, "Hi," like I thought that worked so much better.
Yeah, yeah,
Likewise, the dialogue between the whole Upside Down group about Watergate is so much better in the final version. Like in the script, it comes what their responses to what Dustin is saying comes off as like mocking and mean, like they're making fun of him, like the mean kids at school. But
uh-huh,
in the final version, it's like some really fun banter. They're much kinder, and I kind of noticed a parallel where in one of our previous script episodes, I mentioned that I'd noticed that Steve and Nancy are much more of a team
mhm,
in the final version, which makes sense because they're the most experienced versus Robin and Eddie. And I noticed it here too, where in the final version, Upside Down and Real World Group are much more of a team. It's like a team effort, and there's a
uh-huh,
camaraderie there. Like Steve and everyone are much more encouraging in the final version. It's much more about teamwork, which I feel like works so much better than creating like this manufactured conflict that was originally in the script because
mhm,
you root for them, and that's what makes Eddie's death so devastating in the end because you've seen them work as a team, you've seen the genuine camaraderie and affection. So I think if they'd stuck with the original part, like the original kind of vibe in the script of, where the teens are being like really mean and dismissive,
uh-huh,
you wouldn't have, I don't think you would have, the death wouldn't have landed in the same way that it did, you know?
uh-huh. Yeah.
Um,
I think the final version is much better. It just it matches the characteristics of those characters so much better than the tone that it gives off in the script, you know.
mhm. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I loved Robin's genius child comment. That's not in the script. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
so shout out to Maya Hawk on that one. Um,
yeah, because she says something similar in season 3,
yeah.
right? Yeah,
Oh, to Erica, right. Oh, that's a callback. I didn't catch that. Oh, that's good.
yeah,
Oh, I love that. And something else I noticed is I know they definitely have talked about this that like originally there was supposed to be more of a rivalry between Eddie and Steve, but that they realized they didn't have time for it. And I'm glad that that got cut because I love Steve and Eddie being friends much
yeah,
more.
yeah,
And also I feel like the two Joes have just great chemistry, and I love it. Like I'd rather see them play off each other rather than go at each other, you know?
yeah, yeah,
And like for example, they have some really fun banter about Eddie. Like the two of them have some really fun banter about Dustin's ego. That's not in the script. Originally, I think Steve makes a comment, Eddie makes a comment, but it's very like condescending. It's more like the mean kid vibe we got off of Steve in season one. And it kind of, I think Robin mentioned this when we had her on, that Eddie's introduction scene in the show feels much more like doesn't really fit with the rest of his characterization. I agree because I think Eddie was supposed to be more of this pompous, like I'm alternative, I'm so much better than you, kind of like what Jonathan's got going on, and at least in the first 3 seasons. And I like that that got changed over time with Quinn's performance because I feel like that just works so much better, and he made Eddie this lovable guy. So again, I feel like you root for him and the ending hits harder in a good way because he
yeah,
did that, you know?
yeah, yeah. Like if they had kept this as originally written, like I don't think that people now would still be in denial that he's dead,
Right?
like
You know?
and riots in the street because they killed him off and blah blah
Yeah.
blah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Like,
I totally get that.
and I, love him or hate him, I think you've nailed something. You've done a good job if people feel that way, right? It's supposed to move people. You know,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
we lose a character and nobody cares, and we were supposed to care, you know, you haven't nailed it. Um, so I just really, I love the way they did that. And something else I noticed is that, like in the next part of the scene when Max comes back into the main room, I didn't notice this until I read it in the script, but the script states that the deputies took Max into the basement to interrogate her. And I noticed that when she comes back up, that's clearly where she's coming from, which implies they were trying to intimidate her because they could have just used another room upstairs or on the main floor, which, like, combined with the fact that, like, I talked about this in the live show, but that that all that stuff on rewatch seems to imply they went with Max first, despite the fact that she's not in Hellfire, doesn't have a guardian present. Max outright says, like me knowing where Nancy or Eddie are makes absolutely no sense. It seems to imply they
Yeah.
think she's going to be easier to break because she's a girl, so they take her into the basement to interrogate her. And then, like, and then his, like, what is it? Like, Callahan's comment about, like, oh, we shouldn't have gone with her first. She was kind of mean. I'm like, yeah, you got what you deserve. You're being sexist and you're being stupid. And, like, you got, like, I'm glad Max gave it to you. Like, you got what you deserve, man. Like, and you can tell, at least I think from Powell, that he realizes that, like, that, like, I don't think Callahan gets it, but I think you can start to see Powell realize that, like, okay, they're in over their heads here. What they're thinking isn't correct. You can kind of see that when he's talking to the parents, that he's like, well, shoot, we thought this was going to be, like, open and shut, you know? And it's just not, because I feel like they're still in denial about how bad things are.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I don't really know why they decided to do that other than so that they could set up for that funny line from Callahan, which is funny. Like, I laugh about it. I laugh at it
Yeah.
every time I watch it.
Yeah.
True, like, she is mean, you know. That's
Yeah.
that's just Max. But yeah, I mean, they there's other bedrooms or something they could have took her
Yeah.
to. I mean, and again, I don't know. Again, other than the fact that they needed the others to break off so that they could get
Mm-hmm.
the teenagers out of the upside down. Yeah, I don't know, but too, I mean, I know why the police are there because Karen called them because, she couldn't find her children. But really, I mean, you need to be finding out where Jason is at this point because after the town hall meeting that went terrible for you, and now he's, officially started, Pitchfork Gang with the citizens, like, that's who you need to go find and, like, put a stop to that. And then, or at least try to find Eddie to, protect him from being killed by a mob, but yeah, I mean, they again, like, we've said this like a million times, and so have other Stranger Things podcasters, but Powell and Callahan, I think they mean well, but I mean, they just don't have what it takes, I don't think, to handle the job.
No,
And
and I agree, and you can see that very clearly in this scene. Like, I don't know about you, but when I watched this, even the first time around, my whole thought was Hopper never would have done this. Hopper would have had this handled. Never in your goddamn life. Like, Hopper would have
yeah,
handled this, you know? You can see that conscious even in season one when, like, admittedly Hopper's kind of an a-hole in season one. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
um
yeah,
even in that moment, like when he's interrogating the boys at the school, like, he's talking to kind of like Callahan on the, or rather on Powell, like kind of the sidebar kind of a thing, and then back to them. Like, even when he's being a jerk, he's still, there's not a professionalism, but a commitment to, you can tell that under the surface of all that gruff, he does know what he's doing. He is capable of getting the job done, whereas everyone else that works for him just isn't. Like, they're just not, like, they're used to investigating pumpkin thefts, nothing more serious, and I feel like they're in denial because you'd think after the event of season one, they'd be like, okay, obviously, like, stuff's gotten real. We need to be paying better attention. We need to be kind of doubling down and, like, committing and figuring out what's going on. And they don't. Nobody else but Hopper seems to do that. Like, Hopper, like, commits to trying to, like, kind of get his head on straight to, like, try to be there and help. in the way
Mhm.
he can, and everybody else just seems to be like, that was a one-off. And then another kid goes missing or dies, like, it's a one-off. And I feel like until season, like, not, it's only in season 4 you start to see them be like, oh, like maybe this is a bigger problem.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you know? And I also noticed that there's a lot of extra dialogue between the parents and Powell that's not in the
Uh-huh.
script in these scenes, which I feel like makes sense. I feel like it probably wasn't either was in like one of the annexes,
Mhm.
or it just when they went to film it, they realized they needed a little something extra kind of transition the scene so it wasn't so abrupt and awkward. Um, and so like when the strikes were going on, as
Uh-huh.
as Jeff was never read shared, it's like, well, scripting and writing doesn't end when the scripts are, what I mean, like it continues on during filming because you
Yeah.
notice things as you film. And I think you can like really see that as we do the comparison.
Uh,
And just back to the deputies, like his little pigs comment from Callahan is so creepy.
it
Like it creeps me
is.
out every single time.
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh yeah,
I don't know why it does. It just
no, it's creepy.
yeah.
Like, and this is something I really noticed in season 4, and I feel like this was intentional. He's treating them like they're 5-year-olds when they're actually teenagers. Like Nancy is about, well, no, it's not with them, but like, you know what I mean? Like the older teens are about to graduate or have graduated.
Uh-huh.
And like these are all teenagers, and he's treating them like they're little 5-year-olds, and then seems surprised when they like make a break for it. It's like you're treating them like they're 5, and
Yeah.
they're not. And something I thought I really noticed in season 4 is that there's a big contrast in the way the adults speak to and about our main characters, like the kids slash teenagers, in that like the adults that like aren't in the know, like the deputies, tend to talk to them or about them like they're children that are misbehaving and just use like
Uh-huh.
very juvenile language. Whereas the adults that have an idea of what's going on but are like the villains tend to talk in this very like likewise this very like detached way. They use words like girl to describe Elle, right? So it's
Uh-huh.
similar but from a different, one it's like very juvenile, other ones is very much like, like, oh, they don't know what they're doing, we're the ones who know, we're the ones in control, which
Uh-huh.
I realize is a big contrast to Joyce and Hopper, where the way they talk about things, they talk about the kids and the teenagers like not like they're adults, but like they're mini adults. Like they talk to them the way they would talk to each other or about each other.
Uh-huh.
And I thought that was really interesting that they kind of, and then you have Owens whose dialogue kind of winds up in the middle where sometimes it's kind of erring on the side of like grandfatherly, but other times it's more kind of, serious or like you're an adult. And I thought just it's a subtle thing, but I thought that like kind of changing the tone or the words they use between the adults to kind of indicate whether they're in the know and how they feel or perceive like the teenagers in the
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
That's a subtle thing, but I thought like something I really noticed on readers is how strong that is. It's subtle, so you don't notice it, but like right away. But I just thought that was such a good subtle way of conveying the adults in relation to what's going on and their place now. I just thought that was like really well done.
Yeah, and to your point about that, like I remember even earlier on in this episode, um, when Owens is telling Brenner like I don't see any progress, I see a scared little girl. Like I'm like I mean I get where he was coming from there, and I know they wanted us to, get the understand like she's still a person and all that. But like, no, she's not a little girl. Like, she is, you could say, like, just girl or young girl, because, she's physically, I mean, she's a teenager now. She's not, 10 years old anymore. I mean, I think, mentally, yeah, but, physically, she's not a little girl. You know what I'm saying? So it's like little tidbits of dialogue like that always jump out to me when I notice them of like they, and again, I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to hit home the humanity aspect of it because, Brenner does not think about that side of things. He's thinking about it from a scientific standpoint, whereas Owens is thinking about the person. So, little tidbits. That's why it's fun to when you get a script from the showrunners, fun to break it down. You have anything else on that? I know we did the bike
Yeah.
bike
Yeah,
scene.
yeah, we're getting to the bike scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it kind of reminded me of how I remember experiences in high school, and I know a lot of people have too, where like sometimes I have to deal with these receptionists, and they'd there was one time I had like a computer issue, and we later found out the machine was just faulty, but she had to call somebody, and I'm standing in front of her. And keep in mind, I'm in grade 12 at this point, and I have an early birthday, so I'm like 18 at this point. And I'm a short person, but I'm still like I'm 18, right? At this point. And she calls somebody and in front of me says, "Oh, look, I need you to come down here. This little girl is having trouble with her login." And I'm looking at this woman thinking, this is a high school. Nobody on this campus could be described as a little girl because everybody's got to be minimum 14, right?
Yeah.
So, and this clearly had been like, I don't know if she'd previously worked at an elementary or middle school, but this woman had clearly been on the job too long. Like, when you start, like, because you know how some people get to a certain age and everybody younger looks like a child to them, you know? And so they,
Yeah.
without even realizing it, they talk that way. And you're looking at them like, I'm 18. That's an absolutely ridiculous thing to say to me. Also, even if you are a child, nobody wants to be referred to that way. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to be
Yeah.
infantilized like that. So that's what this really reminded me of is how, adults that are self-aware and have that respect, like Joyce and Hopper do, will talk about, people younger than them, like they're smaller adults. And that's something that my family always did for me. Whereas, a lot of people, they've just been on the job so long or they're so much older that to them it's like, you're just a child. And they talk that way. And I thought it was interesting. Like, I think when Owens is saying it, I think mine kind of, it came across kind of like that receptionist where I don't think it's not a lack of respect to him. It's just, she's a child, right? Because to him, anyone that young is a child. Whereas from the deputies, I feel like it's, just a lack of maturity or a lack of like, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
appreciation for the situation. And yeah, I just think that I thought that was just really, really well done. And as we get into the bike scene, this is description I love too. So when in the script they describe Erica stabbing the car tire with the switchblade,
Yeah.
they describe it as she stabs into the cop car tire like a fucking ninja, two exclamation points. As the blade plunges through the rubber, air hissing, and hissing is like in all caps. And then we transition to the bike scene, and I love that description because that's clearly there for the actors, right? Like nobody
Yeah.
else is gonna see that. And the descriptions, I don't know if they were this like detailed or like beautiful or descriptive in previous seasons. I hope they were because they're just like you read these things and they're just beautiful. You know what I mean? They so perfectly capture the moment, and you can tell the actors are reading this being like, hell yeah, like this is I know exactly what I gotta do here, and that's what you
Yeah.
want, right? Like you want the actors to read it and go, heck yeah, I know what emotion I'm bringing to this. I know what I'm doing. Um, so yeah, then we get into the bike scene, which in my opinion is like the probably the best shot of the entire season. Like it's just I remember watching that for the first time being like mind blown, being like, oh my god, the upside down is literally upside down. Oh my god.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Like hands down, like one of my favorites. Like this one and the one in episode one of season four, the transition between 11 and Max with
Yes,
run up
that
that
one
hill.
too. That
Like
one
those are
too.
my probably my two favorite
Mm.
transition shots in the entire series. But now that we are at this scene, there was a part in here, a directional part that they wrote that did stick out to me. And it's they say as they pedal down the post-apocalyptic street, spores whipping and swirling around them, and like to me when I read that, I kind of just went, is this a pie like is the upside down a vision of the future?
And that's our show. If you like what you heard today, be sure to subscribe and tell your friends. Our theme music is provided by Neon Knights, and our sound editing is provided by Ashton Cooper. Thank you for listening to this episode of Ham Radio, a Stranger Things podcast. Please join us next time, same dial, same time.
Over and out.